Many believe aliens have contacted us, others that they soon will, and if they have, or if they do, if the ball is in our court, what should our next move be? Folks coming into today's video might be wondering if the title is implying we have already been contacted by aliens and asking what we should do, or if we are talking about a hypothetical case where they show up and say hello in a very clear and undebatable way. And the answer is yes, as we will be discussing both scenarios, and for our hypothetical, we will assume that the well-known Navy UFOs turned out to be aliens. As channel regulars know, I am pretty skeptical about aliens coming and visiting us, but not because I think it would be unlikely they would if they were nearby and could. Rather, I tend to assume there are no intelligent alien civilizations in our galaxy or even our wider region of the cosmos. I tend to assume that if you can travel the galaxy in a practical fashion, you can also colonize it, and so on billion-year timelines of evolution and galactic formation, someone who arrived earlier on the scene than us by even just a million years already colonized everything. Thus we would see them easily, even if they were nice enough to leave our planet be. It's also why I tend to assume if we bump into anyone, while they may not be peaceful, they probably are not going to be genocidal thugs coming to wipe us out, because it's just very unlikely anyone with that intent would happen to only show up now, not any time in the last 4 billion years. But if they were nearby and saw us, I can't accept that they wouldn't want to visit. And there's a ton of assumptions in all that reasoning, so we cannot just take it for granted, and thus today we will consider the scenario that they are around and do stop in for a visit. Because there's so much we don't know, and it just doesn't seem weird that if we do have neighbors, they might pop by. We hear about us being a tiny pale blue dot in a boring region of the galaxy as some equivalent to being a podunk town off the main road. This is a bad analogy since, first, it implies alien life is so common that any inhabited planet could ever qualify as boring, which would imply life was so common we would have problems missing it even with our modern limited detection ability. Second, there are not many towns, no matter how off the beaten track, that don't get visitors occasionally, and saying a planet or town doesn't get a lot of visitors is very different from assuming a scenario where a town doesn't know the rest of civilization even exists because it gets visited so rarely. We do have uncontacted tribes on Earth still, but they do know other humans exist, and we also make no effort to hide from them, nor do we spurn any efforts by them to contact us. We can't draw many conclusions from that since we don't know how aliens think. Many guesses about how aliens might behave toward us also rely on if and how they classify social groups too. As an example, I say them and us, and it's a strong aspect of concepts like the Prime Directive from Star Trek that humans and some alien races are the most defining aspect of their policy and behavior. That's going to be an important concept today, and one we'll revisit in a bit, as that mothership landing might not consider itself an ambassador of the Vulcans, or Klingons, or Greys, some alien species visiting the human species, but a multi-species nation visiting a potential neighbor or member, or a group of alien marine biologists here to study whales and other marine life, and trying to talk to the Navy ships by assuming they are also marine biologists. In this same way, for our Navy UFO events, we need to ask what was the reason for this contact event or events. Was it an intentional contact event or just a coincidental collision? Were they up to something else, like studying whales, and we just ran into them? They maybe had some stealth gear but hadn't upgraded to keep up with our recent improvements and the Navy spotted them. Or maybe they did want to be seen. And this matters a lot as an intentional contact event should be very obvious. Hence we'll be assuming that if the Navy UFOs were aliens, they were not attempting to open dialogue at the time, though possibly they were seeding awareness of their existence for a future discussion. Now, why do I say that? When we talk of aliens, we usually mean from some other place in the galaxy, though of course they could be stepping in from some copy of Earth in the multiverse, or some other space, an alternate reality, higher layer of reality, or so on. If we are assuming the normal alien case, that they came here on spaceships, then they have presumably mastered space travel, either the enormous energy and timescales for sublight travel, or some novel method of faster light travel like warp or wormholes. We would not expect any of these to evolve naturally as opposed to as the result of intelligent research and development. Thus they are presumably smart and technological. If we're assuming that the visiting alien is familiar with scientific research, then we can probably take for granted that curiosity is part of their psychology, and probably rather strongly. This alone gives them a motivation to visit us. They're just curious about stuff and people in general. But it also implies a capacity for patience to do things right, as that's critical to science and engineering, and thus gives them a motivation to want to do some preparations before making contact. In this case, Earth has been transmitting radio signals for a long time, and if you are traveling through space to get here, you would have to run into all of those transmissions, at least the ones headed in your general direction, as the planet spins daily and orbits annually, so the sampling of communications you would get over the course of a century of traveling through our broadcast is going to be rather broad. For that matter, even if you had a FTL method, and lived no place inside our light bubble of around 100 light years radius that our transmissions have reached, so could skip those, that ease of travel implies you could have been sending probes to collect information in advance. You don't really need to wait on our signals to know we existed. We would have been visible as a civilization from orbit for many thousands of years, and longer for anyone seeing life there and sending in teams or drones to catalog it. They also presumably would have little difficulty creating drones that passed as natural objects. That group of drones is a flock of birds, and maybe some tree is disguising their Wi-Fi for controlling them, and the radio mast for talking to their orbital craft. And this might even get to include androids looking human, which are also handy for first contact scenarios if you look like some terrifying tentacle monster from a John Carpenter film or the fever dreams of H.P. Lovecraft or H.R. Geiger. So we really should be expecting them to already know our major languages before contact and to be able to present a human face if they want to. Indeed, this might be an excuse for why aliens looked humanoid. They weren't aiming to mimic us, but wanted something that said alien but didn't incite a panic, thus went humanoid for their robot ambassador. And while it's common to argue that they might have problems cracking our language, we discussed why this really isn't so in our Cryptic Aliens episode years back. And I think modern chatbots and AI and learned language models probably have convinced most people that aliens could be using real-time translation devices without too much delays. I don't think they would need any more sophisticated computers than we have right now. And while folks will point to ancient languages we still can't clearly crack, so surely alien languages would be harder, keep in mind that we might have less than 1,000 words written out in some ancient language, including typos, and that 1,000 not on one simple Rosetta Stone, but in a couple dozen fragments by different authors in different regions and a century or more apart in time, all in an era where they had no dictionary either. Alternatively, while we share a common biology and basic environment with those ancient humans, which can help, those aliens have millions if not billions of examples of our language from our radio alone, and our TV. As they are here, they ought to be able to get into the internet too. It's a very different can of worms trying to translate a few fragments of ancient clay tablets versus a language you have that much raw data on. So I think we cannot take for granted that any attempt to contact us would be very clearly an attempt and in a major modern language, but it is hard for me to imagine how they would not have done that. This does raise the question of who they is. Again, we think of them as the aliens of Planet X and us as humanity, usually our own country as the place they reach out to also, but humanity and the aliens of Planet X. the first people to contact you from a given group might not be very representative of that group. Your typical anthropologist wandering around the Amazon is not acting on behalf of Congress or the UN and cannot accurately or properly speak on their behalf. Indeed, the very concept of social grouping can get rather vague in futuristic and alien contexts. For instance, how do you define membership in a group? Like, are you in the Star Trek Federation, which has many species and presumably members of that species who are some non-aligned planet, or the Klingons in the TNG era who were close friends, and who have many factions, some of whom might be independent and not all friends. This gets even vaguer if we're talking about something like membership in a modern political party or a family, concepts like partial membership and what makes you in that family. Is it based on if you live in a house? Partially, sometimes. How about DNA? Neither my wife or I are related to each other or our 3 kids who are adopted. We think of my cat as family, but not really our chickens. If we assume it takes the majority of the group to agree that someone is in it, then that doesn't really work for groups controlled from the top. The boss or mom and dad say if X is in the group. If we say the person can self-identify to be in the group, then a baby, who is clearly family, would not count. And that's a familiar example of how group identity and membership can be very ambiguous. Whereas it can be very clear if we're talking about who is a member of the US Congress or Cabinet, or who is a board member of a company. When dealing with aliens, we should not assume that they have a very clear idea what groups you and I are in, and might assign things like rewards or guilt based on association too. I had a great chat with Jason Variableoff from the Brain of That Philosophy YouTube channel after he gave a talk at the Interstellar Foundation on alien social groupings, then later came on their show to continue it. It reminded me that we want to be careful assuming aliens would have anything like our social structure, and the ethics that tend to be tied to it, and also that we shouldn't be assuming we are encountering homogeneous and easily defined star empires like the Federation from Star Trek, because it isn't likely you would have much uniformity inside a single star system, let alone between 2 star systems that may be a million years diverged since they were founded by some precursor civilization. Aliens in sci-fi often have less divergence in their behavior inside their species than we do. Warrior races like the Klingons, the logical Vulcans, their cousins, the sneaky Romulans, the greedy Ferengi. But in practice, you would expect any ancient, loosely knit civilizations scattered over thousands of systems to be even wider in their variations and policies than we as a planet are. And even a single ship designed to travel for a century to reach a neighboring system without faster than light speed travel might vary more in behavior in their current attitudes, and in contrast to what they were when they left for the trip, than we see in a typical community. You wouldn't get treated the same walking around Brooklyn or London in 1924 as in 2024, and this makes it very difficult for me to imagine any alien civilizations out there having any sorts of universal policies, like the Federation's Prime Directive, or even something singularly minded like the Borg, who without instant communication between Borg cubes ought to have adapted wildly different and potentially hostile policies from time spent apart. Or even spent together. Civil war is common enough in our history, and while we can't assume that about aliens, we can see the fundamentals of it in basic Darwinian principles. In nature, a species, or even a single organism, left to itself, can diverge into 2 hostile cousin groups, one of which preys on the other, and establishes a predator-prey cycle. This is handy for us in some ways, as it means the usual them versus us in science fiction does not apply, much as on Earth, 2 countries, one vastly more powerful than the other, can still have protracted hostile interactions because the bigger beast has to worry about neighboring interference, others jumping on them when weak and distracted from the fight, and even internal disputes of political factions. So as unrealistic as us successfully fighting back against alien invaders tends to be in TV shows, It is also unlikely it would be us versus some grand galactic empire of 1,000,000 worlds, and instead maybe just an invasion force from one continent of one minor planet in one solar system, and where interested third parties might get involved or give us a hand, even for non-altruistic reasons. It also means that whoever is attacking or poking their nose in here might be a rogue faction or a fairly poorly equipped one, badly managed, or even a stupid one. And there's just no one whose job it is to step on them, or not unless they really cross a line, and a few sightings and abductions just don't count. Not a big enough deal to worry about. If we imagine most civilizations have a Star Trek-style non-interference rule, which I doubt they would, but let's say for the sake of argument they did, then anyone we're seeing right now is either very clumsy or very renegade. Now, to be fair, they might not be. I usually say they are clumsy since we have so many sightings of them, meaning they obviously suck at stealth, but since I don't consider those sightings very good evidence, and think most are flat out wrong, it is only fair to acknowledge that an alien isn't screwing up their stealth if they got sighted maybe one time, and the other 10,000 sightings were actual weather balloons, or folks drunk or stoned at the time. And even among very big believers in genuine sightings, it is acknowledged that a very large portion of those sightings are indeed weather balloons or other mundane craft. There are tons of the things up there, or from folks who were dishonest or under the influence. For my part, I think our interest in space and sci-fi and the many sightings predisposes us to assume phenomena in the sky are alien UFOs. But if that is true, then an alien could be here hanging around, never gets spotted, and isn't being clumsy at all, just dealing with our growing interest in space, making us see them where they are not. Or they may have decided that building an interest in space and belief in aliens in the background makes contact easier. So while they are studying us and getting to know us, they let themselves get seen sometimes, just to plant the idea. Still, I feel like the best case interpretation of the Navy UFOs and many of the parallel events would be that if they were alien, they either weren't space aliens, in favor of a case of something from outside our galaxy like a multiverse copy of Earth, or they weren't interested in making contact. I also don't really accept that they've been doing this for decades in order to build an acceptance of aliens in our minds while learning about us. Because neither should have taken that long, and while patience is a virtue for the curious, it's a virtue exactly because curiosity compels you to want to poke your nose in fast. Scientists and scholars do not dawdle, they go as fast as they think they safely can. And at this point, to move into that contact scenario, if they did land on the White House lawn and someone said, "Hey, let's get the president of the National Space Society to talk to them. He talks about aliens a lot on his show," to give some excuse for why I would be talking to them at all, one of my first questions would be, what was your purpose in delaying contact till now? It doesn't do to be belligerent with a person who might be representing a civilization that could crush us like a bug, but then they haven't thus far, and we don't know this person does represent them. The alien might reply, "What delay? I got here last month, and wanted to observe your news for a basic understanding of culture, language, and current events first." And then we would ask about all those other sightings. They might shrug and say they have no idea or get very worried some other party was playing games here. And if there's one alien, odds are good there's many. Space extends around us in every direction after all. And for my part, if I had to make a snap judgment on who to align with, I would go for the guy who showed up in plain day and answered questions, as opposed to the ones who were skulking around for decades. The key thing, though, is asking what we need to know first in a contact situation, and obviously a lot of that is letting them talk, and since they made contact, they presumably have that in mind. But this isn't a science fiction show where aliens need to be mysterious, and in part because the writers don't have time to put together and discuss a detailed history and culture with consistent and clear motivations, which a real civilization probably doesn't have anyway. If they arrive to talk, they have an objective. It might be wonderfully benevolent, but they've got one, possibly several. They also know us better than we know them, so not only should they be expecting to carry the brunt of the initial conversation, they should also be expecting us to ask questions. One of those, if it turned out they were around, would be, "Can you give us your flight logs, please, at least over our own country?" And if the answer is no, then you know they are lying, since it would be very improbable any spaceship would not have a constant log of its current time and position. They could probably fake that up too, but you're always going to be worried that any attempt to rapidly create and give out a false record is going to leave fingerprints on inspection. And while we couldn't inspect it much now, we would have motivation to keep deep diving that data for centuries to come as our own knowledge and abilities improved. If it is a big log, then you can now go through and start comparing data points with known sightings for overlaps, and if there are none, there's a problem. You would hardly expect 100% matches. Many sightings are doubtless outright fabrications, but it would also seem weird for them to have decades of interaction with us and volumes of flight logs and not have a single connection point. I think sightings aren't aliens because I don't think they can visit us on account of not existing near us. If they did, then they could, and I would tend to assume that we would have actual valid sightings. If, on the other hand, they admit they were intentionally letting themselves be seen, or weren't doing it intentionally but couldn't avoid it, and it was happening a lot, then a follow-up should be, did you know how much danger or stress or harm this involved for those folks? And if the answer is no, then again, they are probably lying. This is easy for us to miss since we have not, as individuals or a culture, spent a lot of time thinking on what it's like to be the person who was first contacted except as the hero of a story. It's a little different if we're imagining a real scenario where we need to reach out to some more primitive species, and the shock and impact of that first secret greeting in Act 1 is not going to be over and done with by the end of Act 2. Their life is forever changed, and when you consider the scenarios, most are not very good for that person. I am probably one of the best known skeptics on aliens out there, and pretty well liked even inside the UFO community, mostly because I don't go around mocking or insulting them. I just don't think they see what they thought they saw, or have drawn an incorrect conclusion from the evidence presented. I've never noticed them as particularly more or less rational or delusional on other topics besides aliens than anyone else. The exception to this does tend to be folks who had personal encounters, not just some weird object in the sky, as they often come off a lot more unglued. And we could say they are crazy and they are imagining aliens. But to be fair, encountering aliens who are trying to be covert and being stuck knowing most folks will think you're crazy is the kind of thing that probably would make most of us a bit unhinged. And that wraps back to the contact moment, because if you got some alien speaking perfect English to you and talking about how they studied you for years and admits to being seen a few times, it's not that big a deal. They weren't trying to be and might not have known they got spotted. But then you've got to ask if they actually did abduct people to inspect them or to talk to them. And then you've got to ask the awkward question of if they expect you to give them blanket immunity from civil and legal trial. Now, of course, in reality, even if they said yes, we probed you, and not just for science, we are likely to have to let that go too. But in practice, it would be very weird for them not to have considered the individual negative impacts even getting seen would have had, as we would have. The next question to ask is, who do you represent? Because it's not likely to be the Grand Galactic Council. Something like that could only even exist if there was faster-than-light travel anyway, FTL, and channel regulars know I'm even more skeptical of that happening than aliens visiting, especially as FTL means you now need to consider not just galactic visitors, but aliens from any of the billions of other galaxies in our observable universe, or the likely uncountable trillions or quadrillions beyond our cosmological event horizon. In a no-FTL universe, they not only likely do not represent a federation of races, they probably only represent one planet or system, or at most a relative handful, not millions or billions of them. If we imagine for the moment that interstellar colonization wasn't very common, but space travel to inhabited worlds was more feasible, and that the nearest alien planet to us was 100 light-years away, then odds would favor about 8 others within 200 light-years, and potentially 1,000 within 1,000 light-years of us. That's an awful lot of nothing too, since 1,000 aliens might sound like a lot, but there's 1,000 times that many stars in that volume, and it would be a space only a few pixels wide on a map of the galaxy, so that implies a lot of possible visitors. But if space colonization is possible and generally does not permit already inhabited planets, and there's no FTL, that means we colonize from here out to some primitive alien planet 100 light years away, we would probably have every solar system from here to there colonized, and that means that people visiting them who were human, or at least had ancestry from Earth, could be originating from at least dozens of systems closer to them than we were. They would have many centuries or millennia of divergence from us living on alien worlds, and likely be fairly alien themselves, even if they weren't genetically modified, or some sort of post-human, or a civilization made from robots and AI that rebelled from us, or a species of uplifted intelligent chimps or dogs or cat people. What's more, we tend to assume solar systems get colonized, not planets, and while that might not entail full-scale Dyson swarms, since obviously nobody is doing that nearby us, it should still include a lot of multi-planetary systems and impressively large space habitats, none of whom necessarily share a government over their whole planet, let alone that whole system. Folks coming to visit from there, taking centuries to arrive, are also not likely to be empowered to speak on behalf of their people much. When you ask, who do you represent, the answer is likely to be something along the lines of, we are from the anthropology department at the University of Alpha Centauri B2, on a grant from the government of the Northern Continent and with some sponsors from Institute X and the National Xenoscience Society. Also, we've got a plaque of friendship here from the president of our country. We are told he did personally sign it himself. He's probably not in office anymore, and also, in case your legal analysts don't translate it correctly, it has no binding authority at all, just wishes you well and for friendship. If you are getting anything other than that, odds are you're getting scammed. And that's possible too, because while we can't acknowledge that any interstellar civilization can pound us into the ground with ease, and has no real reason to do so, since they haven't yet, and we don't have anything they need, that does not mean some random aliens showing up here represents any real power base any more than some pirate ship showing up on an indigenous island with a bag full of shiny glass beads does. However, this isn't necessarily a bad situation here, because their shiny glass beads in this case might be genuinely valuable, and for the same reason those glass beads were. If you don't have it, then it doesn't matter how cheap and easy it is for others to make. You still don't have it, and they do. And the glass bead in this case might be working fusion technology, practical starship drives, nanotech, any number of mundane techs to them that would be as impressive to us as a lot of the junk in your car would be to anyone from the 18th or 19th century. Only your car a decade ago did not have internet access to Wikipedia, and a decade before that, Wikipedia did not exist, whereas an interstellar traveler will almost certainly have a copy on board, even if it's an abridged one that only contains more reference material than any library prior to the digital age contained. It has the user manual, it has the instructions for repairing the engine, it has a parts diagram. There's very little we wouldn't trade for that, and it's guaranteed to be in the possession of anyone who landed or even crashed on this planet. It might not even be just on their ship, they might have as a chip in their head. This raises an interesting philosophical point, because while we have Star Trek episodes that show some stranded visitor or bad egg on a primitive planet eyeing them with technology, when the Federation shows up and decries them giving them technology, we don't get anyone replying back, and that's why we built a statue of them, and you will give you the cold shoulder, because they already told us you won't help us and won't attack us either. So we'll take their cures for cancer and abundant clean energy, because that island mansion we gave them was cheap for the price. But the aliens have contacted us and are letting us ask questions, and so we asked them, hey, can we have some of your technology? And the answer is likely to be yes, but. What that but is might vary. Maybe it's limited access into mostly non-militant applications. Maybe it's an offer to sell it to us, and that might be expensive since they know the value. but they also know the cost to the seller is not high. They could ask for an island of their own or a bigger asteroid of their own and probably get it. But they know that we now know that they exist, and that means others do too, and others might be interested in selling to us. We don't want to wait, but we're not stupid, and nobody can promise them whole wards anyway, so you get a sane negotiated price. Probably several, since a lot of countries and companies would love to have first dibs on a piece of tech. Also, if those aliens know us, they might just ask if they could file patents for tech under our laws. Which raises two interesting notions. First, we don't send signals out to aliens much, we listen. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, is more common than active SETI, or METI, messaging extraterrestrial intelligence, but there is some METI and a lot more discussion of it, and I've never heard anyone suggest we broadcast a help wanted ad. Young new planet seeking technical information. Will pay competitive prices. The other one is that some alien rogue trader might be here patenting technology through human agents or just using an android. Another might be here as a smuggler trying to get a lot of first editions of this or that collectible to sell on the black market to collectors or acquire for legal sale as soon as we're out on the galactic scene openly. So it raises the question, now what? What happens after the aliens contact us? It depends a lot on what they want, so we need to ask, and we can't assume they're being honest, so we have to ask how else they could have gotten what they wanted. For instance, as we often note, they don't need to abduct us for our DNA and medical records. They could just abduct a mailbox or a vending machine to lift tons of samples of DNA left on letters or coins, or abduct a library, which could probably have been done even pre-internet with a little drone that went in at night to scan some books. They could have shown up, offered us one piece of decent tech in exchange for some money and permission to hire folks to collect DNA samples of Earth's various organisms, or volunteer for lab tests. Indeed, they wouldn't even need to offer money, they'd get volunteers. And many of their possible motives need to be examined by asking how else they could satisfy them, which often wouldn't involve even interacting with our planet at all, but where it did often be achieved more easily through open communication and trade. Considering they have a vast stockpile of information that we value, but to them is no more valuable than a schematic of a steam engine is to you or I. So what could they value that they can get from us or our planet that they couldn't get by simple purchase using information as coin? And remember, they are not dealing with just the US or NATO, but any nation or corporation or even individual who can satisfy their request. Us too, by the way. Any one of them with a copy of the Encyclopedia Galactica could undercut others and sell it to us cheap. So it has to be something we can give them, not necessarily willingly or happily, but that's a fairly limited number of options. Again, it's not very likely a vast interstellar empire is looking to wipe us out, or keep us as slaves or food animals. We've talked about that in other episodes like Hungry Aliens, and the problem is that it's too mustache twirling. If the universe is populated by civilizations that find eating other civilizations ethical and fun, then we would already know about it. That sort of sadism doesn't imply a lot of self-restraint and delayed gratification, nor can I think of any reason they would wait. They probably can clone or grow meat, we already can, and they probably have basic AI and good robots for labor, even if they restrict advanced AI. They also probably have very convincing virtual reality for fulfilling anything like that, and without the consequences of potentially getting wiped out by any civilization that had a sense of moral outrage and a crusader bent, which I would tend to think was more common than a functional civilization built around openly sadistic and vicious habits. So we've made contact and they probably have made us an offer of some sort, and we probably accepted it. With we probably not including a number of countries and groups opposed. Maybe it was trade access, maybe an offer to get some technology in exchange for signing some basic charter of how we treat interstellar visitors, or conduct ourselves when we dial out to the stars. Maybe they do want an asteroid or permanent access to 0.1% of the sun's light or something else, mining rights on Jupiter for hydrogen propellant to refuel from, and a base on one of its moons. Who knows, but probably nothing crazy. Again, someone else can underbid them. At the same time, they are likely to be good negotiators, know us pretty well, and whatever they want and whatever they offer, it's likely to be a better deal for them than we would have gotten if we knew more. Doesn't mean we wouldn't profit a bunch, maybe our descendants disagree, but for folks alive right now, it might mean biological immortality, clean abundant energy, and access to automation, ensuring that a 10-hour work week and personal mansions was the new norm for the working man. Amusingly, if this was some rogue trader getting in early, they might have made some agreement with some companies or governments privately and quietly, because they don't want it getting out to the wider space community. You could actually have hundreds of different minor factions already on Earth, each negotiating different deals with different groups, and each themselves representing some group potentially as small as hundreds, or even just themselves individually, not some mighty star empire of trillions. And we make out pretty good from that arrangement, honestly, same as some kid with a time machine and a box of encyclopedias could have made out like a bandit selling them to the folks in the 1800s, even if they were essentially stealing all that hard work from the folks who really invented it or compiled that encyclopedia. The folks they're selling it to did pretty good out of that arrangement anyway. That technology probably offers us massively long and healthy lives, abundant clean energy, and great prosperity, along with awesome entertainment options. A spaceship probably has a great library and good equipment for watching it or experiencing it after all. That also means though that it's not of much interest to them. They've already got that. So it is fair to ask what they want that we actually have, and to keep in mind that any trade they're conducting is in that same context. They and their potential clients already have clean energy, abundance of wealth and automation, and access to realms of virtual reality. So if they are here, it's because they want something else. That might be simple raw materials, as they are a finite supply and thus have value, but otherwise there has to be something they value or that others value and can give them something they do value for it in trade. And that might be something like a desire to convert us all to their religion or ideology, or the feeling of accomplishment of being able to say they risked their neck to give us tech even though they might get caught and punished for it. An alien visitor landing here to say hello might be as interested in martyrdom as money, because advanced post-scarcity civilizations tend to mostly be scarce in purposes that let people feel they've done something important and meaningful. It comes down to asking them then, why are you here? When did you get here? Why were you quiet if it's been a while? What are you offering us, and what do you want? And thankfully, most of the scenarios for that work out well for us. Now let's close by imagining for the moment that they did indeed already do this, and that those Navy UFOs or some of the other sightings were the actual contact, and see it through that looking glass. First, as we saw, it wasn't an attempt at overt communication. It could be a test of reaction, as it tells you what they can detect and thus what they cannot, and tells you how much you can push before they all believe you are real. And we're not talking about how the fighter aircraft reacts either, though that's telling to them too. Rather, you poke and see what floats up in public broadcasts, and they should be able to get a lot of information. They should be expert analysts equipped with amazing computers and analytical tools. So we should ask, what does it indicate? And there's one conclusion that's pretty decent, and that's simply that they haven't been seen this way since. So they use the event to better calibrate their own evasion equipment and methods, because there's no other purpose I can imagine that's serving, and because they wouldn't know what the premier navy on the planet could actually do simply by looking at our broadcasts. Our sci-fi movies and speculation don't tell them anything after all. They would not know what we have, and for the skeptically minded, keep in mind that if they are here, one thing they do know is that aliens exist and can visit our planet. So for all they know, the US Navy is getting insights and tech assists from aliens, just a different faction. Again, we have to look at motive and from their perspective. They really would have no reason to expect, simply by their own existence and own first contact scenario from their own history, that we would go uncontacted for long, or that other aliens who are likely to keep their presence quiet too might not already be playing the game too. This is the only reason I can think of for intentionally buzzing our Navy, and it wouldn't likely be by accident. Aircraft carrier groups are hardly covert themselves. Problem is, it's the same reason any other government has for doing that, or some company testing new hardware, or even other branches of the military or Navy itself have. Go test how good your new system is by bringing it by the folks with the best hardware. You are never going to tell them you did it if they didn't figure it out by themselves. And even if you were a different branch of our own military, you're not going to advertise the awesome new stealthy tech you have or fast-moving drone or missile. And if Congress asks, hey, we're doing an investigation and you didn't say it was you, why not? You might just point out that they didn't specifically ask you and you didn't think it particularly benefited national interest to splash that on the nightly news. Alternatively, you might have people falsely claim responsibility hoping to make themselves look more impressive. So sadly, whether it was aliens or other terrestrial players, there's a pretty good chance we will never know for sure. But as an upside, if aliens have contacted us, or do so in the future, as we saw today, odds are good it will be to our net benefit. No matter what else though, if aliens do contact us, we should absolutely pick up that phone and answer back. And the good news for me is if I'm wrong, odds are good everyone will be too busy running and hiding from our new alien overlords to remember I was wrong. But what do you think? What should we do if aliens do contact us? And what other motivations might they have beyond what we said today? And of the reported contacts and sightings, what other motivations might they have had? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons while you're down there. We asked today if aliens might spy on us and why, but whether or not aliens are visiting us and harvesting our info, AI sure is, and on behalf of a lot of shady characters. People search sites publish your personal information, including details about family members, for anyone to look up online. In one case, a child advocacy worker's own children were found listed on a data broker site as her associates, and as a foster and adoptive parent, that makes me very glad I use Incogni. Incogni uses their AI to focus on finding your information online and send automated takedown requests for you. All you have to do is sign up, give them permission to act on your behalf to delete data, then they go to work and your data goes away. You can check up on the progress to see who had your data and how detailed and risky it was considered. Incogni makes these data harvesters take your info down, and they keep doing it too, making sure that it stays down. Incogni is available risk-free for 30 days, so you can try it out and get a full refund if you aren't happy with the service. Use code IsaacArthur at the link in the episode description to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Go to incogni.com/IsaacArthur and take your data back. We'll continue our discussion of alien life next week, November 24th, by asking if gravity itself might be the main cause of the Fermi paradox, before talking about how ultra-relativistic spaceships might be built and function under known science. Then we'll close out the month with a return to our megastructure series to discuss the Stanford Taurus space habitat. If you'd like to get alerts when those and other episodes come out, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. You can also help support the show by becoming a member here on YouTube or at Patreon, or check out other ways to help at isaacarthur.net. Until next time, thanks for watching and have a great week.